everybody and welcome to the channel. I am Richard. Today I am going to put you in a plane and shoot you up in the sky because we are going out flying. The journey probably won't be that peaceful though, because we are going to jump into these little airplanes here and try to shoot each other down. All in the hunt for fame. The game I'm going to show you is Dockfighters The Ale Wars. This is a 1 to 4 player game, around 60 minutes of gameplay and from 14 years and above. The game I have here is a prototype and will soon be on Kickstarter for you to take a look at and enjoy. I am going to give you an overview of this game today so you will have a clearer understanding what this game is actually about. So let's just take a look at it. This game plays out in an alternative past. What had been Germany is now split up into a bunch of different states. The year is 1948 and we are 20 years after the Great Depression. Economy is doing quite well and we are living in somewhat peace with the different states. But every now and then differences will break out and smaller wars will start. Because the country is now split up into so many different states, it's easier for us to travel, trade, and warfare by plane instead of using the road net. But because of a situation with the ale supply, a war is now breaking out. A state called the Saxons have flooded the market, and we just can't have that, right? Too much ale is never a good idea. So now everyone is taking up in the sky, getting into their planes, and heading out for war. This is where you come in. You are the squadron leader of these planes, sending your men out and hopefully get them back in one piece. In this game, you will get something called fame for every plane you shoot down. And fame is kind of the point system in this game. Why do we call it fame, you say? Well, it's because these pilots are getting quite arrogant and the only thing they want is fame and their name on a big poster. So you are on the hunt for more fame. At the start of the game, each player must also pick up some flight sheets and some personal files. These will be their captains flying the ship and these will be representing their airplanes that they have out on the map itself. And as you can see on these sheets, there's a bunch of information, but I will go through this in a bit. Every now and then you need to do a pilot skill test, and this can be in a bunch of different situations. For example, if you're flying in a thunderstorm or if you need to bail out from a crashing airplane. What you do then is that you take the D6 and then you roll it. And depending on which experience level your pilot has, you will have different results. A green and unexperienced pilot will need to roll +5 to actually pass the test. But an ace is a much better pilot and only needs to roll a +2. How your setup will look is all depending on which mission you choose, because in the start of the game you need to roll for initiative. The one that wins the roll is the one that gets the initiative marker and gets to choose a mission first. Then the loser or the other players will choose their missions and set up their planes according to what their mission says. Once this has been done, we are ready to start playing the game. And this game is played out during 3 different phases. The first one is the movement phase. The first step in the movement phase, we need to move all the ACM missiles. Now these are weapons that we do not know that much about yet and should be treated with careful. The first thing we do is to move them 5 hexes straight forward. We then need to roll a d6. If the value of the d6 is less or equal to the amount of turns this missile has been on the way, it is removed from the board and nothing else happens. But of course this one can also travel into another airplane here, for example, and bomb them to pieces. The second step in the movement phase is to determine the movement of the ground targets. We will do this by using this diagram right here and this diagram right here. On the target's first movement, we need to determine which is their initial direction, the way the arrow is pointing. And we do this by using the left diagram, this one right here. On each consecutive turn, the direction can be changed by using the right-hand diagram. So depending on which way the targets on the ground are pointing, we will use the two different diagrams to see which way they will turn and move. Once we have moved the ground targets around, it's time for us to move the ships around. But this is split up into two different phases. We first move the big airships, and then we move the smaller Dockfighters. But before we start to move our planes, we need to look at our plane sheets and our personal files. This is our pilots and this is our plane. Up here you can see that you can name your pilot. And you can name them anything, it will not affect the game in any way. Under the picture of the pilot, you keep a record of each kill you make. This includes ground targets or enemy aircrafts. Out here we can see the experience track. For every mission that these pilots have flown, we should cross off one box. Meaning that he will be a green pilot when he have done his first mission. And once he have done 3 missions, he will come up to the blue field and become an experienced pilot. But to become a veteran, the yellow ones here, you need to at least have 1 victory, meaning that you have needed to destroy something. Unless you have destroyed something on your last mission, you cannot become a veteran. And to become an ace, you must have at least 5 victories. So if you have flown 6 missions, but only have 3 victories, you will not become an ace on your next mission. You need to have at least 5 victories to come up and cross this box. Once you become an ace, you get a fighter ace skill. These are determined by rolling a d6. Once you become ace a second time, you get to choose if you want to take the level 2 skill of the skill you have already acquired, or if you just want to roll a d6 to get one at random. To keep a track on all the different levels of your pilots, you have these cool little rings here that you put on the bottom of the plane to make sure that you can see the difference between the different experienced pilots out on the board. On the airplanes data sheets, you can see the name of the airplanes, a little history about the planes, the maximum speed that these planes can fly, the minimum speed that this plane can fly, the engine power, and how high the agility is, meaning how good it is at turning. Out here we have the weapons of this airplane. Here we have the names of the weapon. Here we have how many dice you get to roll on close, medium and far away distance. And this is what you need to roll to actually make damage on your attack. Out here we have the ammo. These airplanes here only have 1 shot and then it is empty. Some of the other airplanes here, they actually have 2 shots before they empty up. These are the structure points of this aircraft, meaning that if it's hit once, we cross out the first box. If it's hit one more time, we cross out the second box and the airplane is destroyed. To move planes around, we need to take a look at what kind of speed the plane has. This is a Dockfighter, meaning that it has a maximum speed of 7. The current speed of this plane is 5. Before we move our plane, we need to decide if we want to accelerate or decelerate or just keep the speed we have. If we want to accelerate, we need to look at the engine power of this plane. In this case, this one has an engine power of 2, meaning that if we want to accelerate, we would accelerate by 2 up to 7. But if we instead wanted to decelerate, we would take the engine power 2 plus 1, meaning that we would end up all the way down on 2. Now, I just want to keep the speed that I already have, which is 5. So I could choose to move 5 hexes straight ahead, or I could choose to turn. To be able to know how your airplane that you are controlling at the moment can turn, you need to look at this movement table. Remember I showed you that each plane have their own agility? The small ones of course have a lot more agility because they can turn a lot faster than these big ones here. I mean, this one takes a long time to turn, but the small ones, they can twist and turn a lot faster. And this is where this movement table comes into play. But what does this mean? Well, if we look at it, it's actually not that complicated. Over here you have the very low agilities, meaning the bigger planes. And as we move up, we have planes with higher and higher agility. If we look at the big ones here with the very low agility, they can make their first turn during the third step, meaning that they need to move 1, 2, 3 hexes until they can make their first turn. But the ones over here with the extreme agility can make a move on their first, second, and third turn. So if we look at these small planes here, the Dockfighters for example, they can actually do their first turn already on their first hex. Then they could move half their movements rounded up and do a second turn. Now each turn will cost you 1 speed. And you can also raise your altitude or lower your altitude, and that will also cost you 1 speed. Also, if you choose to do the Immerman maneuver here and turn back, it will cost you speed. Or give you speed, depending on if you lower your altitude or raising your altitude while doing the maneuver. Plus, you have the barrel roll, remember, when you can actually roll your airplane to a hex adjacent to the one you started from. And you can do this instead of a regular turn. So these small planes here have a quite high agility and can do a lot of movements. But these big bad boys here over here, for example, have a very low agility. And it takes a long time for them to turn, but it makes sense, right? I mean, they are quite large and these ones are quite small and fast. So every time you turn, every time you higher your altitude or lower it, you will have plus or minus speed, right? But you will first subtract or add this amount of speed at the end of your movement. So you won't do it on the way, you need to calculate it as you go on. Just be careful, because if you have below your minimum speed at the end of your movement, the plane will go into a tailspin and crash. Now you can still do a pilot test to try to jump out of the plane and save the pilot. Let's just hope for the best. During your turn, you can also choose to land a plane at an airfield. To do this, your plane must fly straight ahead and it may not turn. It needs to be on the lowest level, meaning this one here. This is your altitude level. You need to be at minimum speed to be able to land your plane. At the end of this movement here, it is considered to be landed, and then we need to change the altitude of the plane, removing the last altitude level. If you instead want to take off, you need to do the same thing but reversed. You have the altitude 1, you move the airship in a straight line, and you add 1 altitude level to number 1. At the end of the movement phase, it is considered to have taken off. These big bad boys here can also move backwards. That was phase number 1, the move phase. We have moved the ground targets and we have moved the airships. Now we move into phase number 2. This is the combat phase, where we actually go into action. And the first step of phase number 2 is where the ground targets fire. But don't worry too much, because not all of these ground targets can actually hit you. If they don't have a value at the bottom of their tokens, well, they can't hit you. But it kind of makes sense, right? I mean, a truck can't jump up in the air and slap an airplane, it just won't happen. But the flank tank here, for example, actually can. In combat, we first need to see if the attacker can actually reach and attack and hit its target. And it doesn't matter if it's a ground target or an airplane we're talking about, it counts for them both. To see what kind of dice the ground target gets to roll in one distance, we need to look at the bottom of the token. And depending on what it says on the token, they will get to roll a certain amount of dice. First thing we need to do is to determine who the ground target will fire at. They will always fire at the closest target, but in this case it is a draw. We would need to roll a die to see who will be hit. Whoever rolls the smallest amount is hit. Once we have done that, we need to determine if we are close, medium, or far away from the ground target. If you are within a distance of 3 hexes away from your attacker, you are considered to be close. If you are between 4 and 6 hexes away, you are considered to be on medium distance away. And if you are in 7 to 9 hexes away, you are considered to be far away from your attacker. And the same goes for the airplanes as well, but to see how many dice they can roll, we need to look at their data sheets instead. But they also have close, medium, and far away distance as well. Once all of the ground targets have fired, it's time for the players to fire with their airplanes. And this time it does not matter if it's a big airship or a dogfighter or something in between. We go after experience level. But it's the other way around now, meaning that the most experienced, the aces, they get to go first. Then we go down to the yellow pilots, the veterans, and then the blue, the experienced, and the basic ones, the green ones, the newbies, they get to fire last. But it kind of makes sense, right? I mean, if you have more experience, you are probably a faster shooter. And to hit the target, we need to roll a 6. A 1 is always a miss. So if we're within range, we just roll and we get 6s and we hit right. Well, no, that's not correct either, because we have a bunch of different modifiers. Depending on if we're shooting through a cloud, for example, we will actually lose dice. 1 die per cloud hex. But if we are tailing our opponent and shooting at their tail, we get a -1 modifier. Meaning that if we should have 6 to hit and we roll a 5, we still hit, because 6 minus 1 is 5, right? So that is a hit. But in this case here, for example, we actually have an ace pilot hunting a poor little basic pilot. And because he is 3 levels above the basic pilot, he has a -3 modifier. Meaning that now, instead of needing to roll 6, he actually only needs to roll 3 to hit that poor pilot. And then we also have the higher positions. This one here is in a higher altitude than the basic pilot, meaning that he has a -1 modifier. And it makes sense, right? I mean, he's in a higher position. Of course, it's easier for him to hit his target. But only that is 1 level below you or 1 level above you. If they're more than 1 level above or below, you are not able to hit them anymore. And if you are head on with your target, you're coming straight at them, head to head, you have a +1 modifier. Meaning that now you really need to get those 6s to hit your enemy, because now it's even harder for you to hit it. And again, it makes sense. I mean, you're coming straight at each other, it's really hard to hit, right? So it all makes sense. And then we have these little small ones here, the Dockfighters. I mean, they're so tiny and pretty hard to shoot. So it will always be harder to hit because it's so little, right? I mean, it just makes sense. Then we have some targets that are just easier to hit. I mean, these airships are huge. So if you miss them, you are kind of a bad pilot. Which is why you get to re-roll every miss that you roll. But you can only do this once, and the second roll is valid. And the same thing applies if an airplane is attacking a ground target. There will also be modifiers that might change the result that you really want to happen. For example, if you're shooting at a moving truck, it will be harder for you to hit it because, well, it is moving. So you will need to add +1 to your result. But the big bad airships here, for example, the bombers, well, they have a pretty big area when they drop them bombs that they can hit, giving them a -1 modifier. Again, means if they need to hit 6 from the start, they now only need to roll 5 to actually hit this flank tank down here on the ground. The experience of the pilots also matters when hitting ground targets. A green pilot like this one over here, for example, will have a 0 modifier. But the ace over here will have a -3 modifier because, well, he's just better at hitting those targets. So once we have calculated all the modifiers, we have rolled our dice and see if we got a hit or not. This pilot here got 2 hits. For example, 5. Meaning that they will take those 2 dice and get rid of the ones that was a loose, right? I mean, that one just shot right out in the air. And then we need to roll these 2 dice now to see if we actually manage to do damage on the ship. And to do this, we need to look at our weapons. Because depending on, again, what kind of distance we are within, we need to roll different results to see if we actually manage to hit and do damage. Again, a 6 is always a hit and a 1 is always a miss. So now we know how to attack. But what do we actually attack with? Well, there are a bunch of different configurations for your planes, because you have some things that is called on-board weapons, which are the weapons that are actually attached to the plane itself. But you can also do something that is called external loadout, which means that you basically upgrade your plane with more weapons. External weapons are weapons that you attach to your airplane at the beginning of a mission. On your datasheet, you can see how many external weapons you can have on that plane. This plane here can have 3 different external weapons attached to them. And down here you will cross out which weapon that this plane is carrying at the moment. There are a lot of different external weapons for you to attach to your planes, and they have a bunch of different effects and damages depending on which weapon you choose and which target you are hitting. If the planes you are wielding do not have the external loadout on their datasheet, well then the planes can't have external weapons. Maybe these planes are too small and it just can't carry them. And you should also take into account when you do these external loadouts, because some of the weapons are quite heavy and they will make your airplanes a little bit less movable and taking away some of the agility points on that plane. Again, it makes sense, right? Because the plane gets heavier and it will be a little bit more difficult to twist and turn the plane. The external loadout weapons can only be used once, which means that this is a one-time. You load them out in the beginning of the missions, and once you have used one of them, that one is gone and cannot be used again. These big bad boys here have 3 docking points, 2 on each side and 1 on the top. And you can attach different things to them. You can attach, for example, a docking clamp on them, which would allow a little airplane to land there and become repaired. Because these big ones have crew members, and each docking point have 1 crew member. But you can also choose to attach a weapon to them because, well, who doesn't like a little bit more of destruction? So that's the way combat works. It's quite easy, right? I mean, you first need to make sure that you're within range, withdraw or add any modifiers, then you need to see what kind of dice actually hit the target, then you take those dice and you roll them, looking at your data sheet to see the weapons and how much you need to roll to actually hit. And if you hit, well, great success, you are an ace pilot, or maybe soon to be. So now we have done the move phase, we have done the combat phase, and now we move into phase number 3. This is the weather phase. At the start of each scenario, you determine the weather by rolling a d6. And depending on which result you get, you will get different amount of clouds, or rain, or thunderstorm, or even blue sky out on the board. But in each phase 3, we need to roll the die again. To use the wind direction token here, which is also set at the beginning at the scenario. Depending on which result we get on this token here, we need to twist and turn these in different ways. So let's take a look at the wind direction token. If we get a 1 or a 2, the wind's direction will change to the left corner over here, next to the error, meaning 1 step like that. But if we roll a 3 or a 4, it will blow straight ahead, not changing direction. And if we get a 5 or a 6, it will change to the right instead. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And depending on what you roll, the wind will change in that direction. Once we have determined the wind's direction here, we also need to see if we got a 1 or 6 on the die, because if we get a 1, the weather actually gets a little bit better. But if we got a 6, the weather gets a little bit worse. But it can never get better than blue skies, and it can never get worse than thunderstorms, so it's not all bad, right? And once that is done, we need to roll the die once more. And again, determine on which result we get on the die and which weather condition we have. The clouds will move in different speeds. Meaning that if it's, for example, is a blue sky and you get a 1, the clouds won't move at all. But if it's a rainy day and you roll a 6, it will move 3 hexes instead. So it all determines on what you will roll and what the conditions are at this round. Depending on which weather conditions you have, the clouds will act a bit different. They can be broken, for example, which means that they have an altitude of 3, and you can fly through them without any extra effects, but it will make it a bit harder for the enemies to actually see and hit you. If it's a rainy day, the clouds are considered to cover all levels, which means that you can't fly above or beneath them. You just need to fly around those rainy clouds. If the wind speed is 3 and a plane is caught up in a cloud, it will move 1 hex in the cloud's direction. The pilot will also need to do a skill test. If he does not pass the test, he will receive critical damage. When the weather conditions are taken care of, it's time for us to turn the turn marker up by 1. And then we take the initiative token and we give it to the player on our left. Now it's time for us to go back to phase number 1 again and start all over. And this is the way the game goes on. The player moves the little ships around, they hopefully hit some targets out there, and they get fame points when they shoot down other planes. And depending on which mission you and your fellow players have chosen, the game will end in different ways. Also depending on if you're playing a campaign mode or maybe you're playing solo, it will all look different. Like I told you in the beginning, the setup, it all looks different depending on which mission you're choosing, and also the different campaigns will all affect what is on the board and what your end goal is. Which makes this game quite awesome, because there's so many different ways for you to play this game. Or why don't you just make up your own mission instead? I mean, the game truly allows it. And you can also play in free mode, meaning that you battle other players, you develop your pilots, and you become a better air fleet army, which is just cool. Plus, we have, of course, the campaign. In this campaign, there are a lot of missions for you to take on and follow up on and go on out into battle to take on whatever challenges that will be on your way. There's quite a lot in here to do for you. I mean, just look at it, it's quite thick. In this game, there's also a solo mode where you are battling a bot named Conrad, and they will actually control the enemy ship and giving you quite the fight for your money. So if you're a solo player and you like to go out on adventure all by yourself with these cool little planes here, well, it's no problems. Just go ahead and start to do your flight test. Another cool feature in this game is this magnetic system. I mean, you just pop on the weapons on the airplanes or change altitude pretty damn easy by removing the piece you don't need anymore, adding the new altitude, and popping on the plane. It's just so simple and so brilliant. And honestly, it makes me feel like a happy little kid again. Also, this is just one map. You can make it twice as big as well. This is of course for more players to give you more space, but look at this. This will be an enormous cool board where you can truly go out on adventure. A solo mode in this game where you are able to move the ship around when it's the enemy's turn. So this is a great game with so many possibilities. To this game you also have a really neat storage solution. I mean, in this beautiful and well-made box here you have different compartments for all the little components that you want to fit in here, making the game really easy to tear down and set up. This is what we want. Do this. This is great. There you have it, people. That was Dockfighters The Ale Wars for you. This is a fast, cool, and funny, and quite strategic game for you to take on and try. If you like battle games where you are in it for fame and glory and just want a good time, check this game out. It will be out on Kickstarter soon, and there will be links down here in the description, so if you want to know more about it, be sure to check this out. If you like this video, people, please give it a thumbs up, throw in a comment there for me and tell me what you thought about it. If you like this channel, why not support it by subscribing to it? It gives me a smile on my face every time I get a new subscriber. And until next time, people, please keep on spreading that board gaming love I know you all have. Peace.